Hey, good morning YouTube. FatMan Tully. Having just a ham and cheese omelet this morning. From this wonderful coffee cake that my wife made. And this is actually going to be the subject of discussion this morning. Glass of milk, what better to have with your coffee cake than a cup of coffee. So, I'm going to have my breakfast, clean my plate like a big boy. And we'll be back in a minute. Hey YouTube, I ate all my breakfast, drank my glass of milk. The milk was probably 3 servings of milk. It's a pretty big cup, 8 ounces being a serving. Like I said, we're going to talk about that coffee cake. My wife strives to cook more on the healthy side of things. So she adds things and changes recipes, but keep in mind, my wife has been baking all her life, so she knows where she can make substitutions and what substitutions can be made. She also reads a lot, and I mean, the woman hardly ever puts down a book, but she reads a lot, so she knows what other substitutions can be made. So I've got her recipe here. I'm not going to bore you reading the whole recipe off. She doubled the recipe because she wanted to do it in a bundt pan, which is no big deal. Even though the recipe calls for a 9-inch square pan. You can make modifications. You need to know what you're doing, so you need to do a little homework, but I trust that if the stuff hits the fan, what have you, I'm going to have my wife along for the ride, along with a few other people that I trust. So looking at her recipe, I had her, she does, half the time she doesn't even use a recipe, she's just got it all memorized. I asked her to write down the modifications that she did to make this a more healthy coffee cake. Coffee cake isn't healthy really. It's got a lot of sugar in it. It's got a ton of sugar in it. Processed white sugar, brown sugars, all this kind of stuff in there. So I asked her, and the recipe calls for half a cup of soft shortening. This is a very old cookbook. So I'll put a picture of the cookbook at the end. Both of them, she's got a newer version of it as well. The original one was a loose leaf, so I mean pages are falling out of it and stuff because she's been using it for so long. But the recipe calls for 1/4 of a cup of soft shortening. There's no such thing as soft shortening anymore, it's all soft. So she doubled it, so it would have been half a cup. She changed that to 6 tablespoons of soft shortening. So she cut back on the shortening, and she added, in place of the shortening that she cut out, she grated 2 apples. 2, I believe they were Granny Smith apples. She grated them up and threw those in there. Now we've got the makings of a pretty tasty coffee cake because we had the apples in there. One of the other things she did in the flour mix, it has you sift together 1.5 cups of, calls for gold medal flour, but let's not go with brand preference, it's flour. 2 teaspoons of baking powder, which is, you have to have that, and half a teaspoon of salt. With the changes she made in this recipe, even though she doubled it, you don't double the salt. And that is one of her notes. In place, in a 1 cup measuring cup, she put 2 heaping tablespoons of ground flax, 2 heaping 1/4 cups of whole wheat ground flour, and then fill it up with flour. Double the baking powder only. You never have to double the salt. So for the streusel part that goes in the middle and on top and all the goodness, the sugary goodness, she has a instead of using regular brown sugar, she used a dark brown sugar, which is more healthy for you. And instead of the chopped nuts, she used oatmeal. Nuts are good for you too. That was just, we didn't have any nuts, so she used the oatmeal. But this is just some of the examples. This is one example of many, many things that you can do. In my omelet, eggs are much better for you than people think they are. They will keep you full longer, so you don't eat a lot more. I probably won't eat now. I may have a quick sandwich about 2 o'clock and we'll eat dinner late. But that's just because we're outside a lot now. And it's a nice day. So I used a ham in there that was, it was a smoked ham and was not salted, so it was low sodium. I have high blood pressure, so we do a lot of low sodium cooking around here. My wife will always add salt because her blood pressure is fine. I have high blood pressure, so I watch my salt intake. And I watch pretty much my whole diet. I try to eat, I don't eat out a lot. You'll see me buy processed crap once in a while, but excuse me, I don't really do it. But eating healthy doesn't have to mean no flavor. My omelet was wonderful. I used a sharp cheddar cheese to give it some flavor. The ham was smoked instead of salt cured ham. The eggs were eggs. What can you do with an egg, right? And I added 2 tablespoons of milk to the eggs, a pinch of salt, just a very small pinch, because the salt reacts with everything else in the omelet and kind of makes it a little fluffier. So, and salt, contrary to a lot of belief, salt is not a flavor. Salt will enhance other flavors. So it's one of those things, if it's used properly, salt is just fine. We don't buy iodized salt, we stick to sea salt most of the time. And that's pretty good. We got a salt grinder, and it's at its finest setting, so it just kind of makes a little fluff out of it. Excuse me again. But there are other spices and things that you can add. I love mushrooms and I love onions. Basil is a good seasoning for chicken. Basil, thyme, rosemary, those are all good on chicken. You can use mixes like Italian seasonings. They don't usually have much, if any, salt in them. Cooking without salt is not going to hurt anybody. There's a lot of ways to really bring out flavor. My wife likes my cooking, and I very rarely will put any salt in anything, just a very small amount, just to help enhance some of the other flavors. So do a little research, do a little looking around. There's a lot of different ways to cook healthy and to be healthier. When my wife makes bread, the bread recipe she has calls for all-purpose flour or bread flour, but there's different kinds of flour. I'm not a baker, so I'm kind of lost on a lot of that. But she'll substitute wheat flours and that sort of thing. When she makes biscuits, they're made with wheat flour, or a half and half, half white flour, half wheat flour. And keeps your digestive system flowing properly. You need the fiber. And people look at fiber as nasty. Sometimes a nice green leafy salad is the way to go. But have a mixture of greens, some kale, some, I Iceberg lettuce is my favorite. I like it, but it's not as good for you as some of the other things. Throw some spinach in there, some fresh spinach out of the garden. There's so many different types of lettuces that you can put together to make a salad with, and each one has its own little flavor, and it really comes together, and it's really pretty tasty. I buy light dressings, fat-free dressings. My wife has really been watching labels lately, and one of the biggest ones she found was the store brand light mayonnaise. Had 90 calories per tablespoon, which is a lot. Mayonnaise has a lot of calories to it. And she looked at the brand name, Kraft. I don't like using brands, but the Kraft was, I believe, 70 calories per tablespoon. And they're both light, they're both mayonnaise. One costs a little more, but is it worth it? As long as we can afford to do it, we're going to buy the better for you stuff as opposed to the less expensive. There's kind of a payoff in the end where hopefully I'll continue to lose weight. My wife is losing some weight too. We're both on medications for various things, which kind of happens when you get a little older, I guess. Where to go from there, I guess I can't tell you. Everybody's got to do their own little bit of homework. The cooking shows on TV are, they're kind of, I guess I would say, not the greatest. They're good, they're fun to watch. There's some really good recipes on them. Some of them do show some really healthy cooking methods. But like I said, use your other spices. Salt isn't just the only spice in the cupboard. There's a lot of different spices. My wife likes my cooking. I use very little salt. She never did. As the kids were growing up, she wouldn't let me cook a lot. And now she has no problem letting me cook because I can, and she knows I can. I used to be a cook in a couple of different restaurants when I was putting myself through school, so I do have a clue. I always liked making breakfast, so that was always my favorite meal to make, was breakfast. So it's kind of a different thing. When my wife makes bread, she makes lots of different kinds of bread. She makes her own French bread. When you're looking to have some garlic bread with your spaghetti or your lasagna, it can be pretty tasty stuff. My wife's a really, really good baker, so I like that. I don't know how many times I can say that. So out in our garden, well, in some of the pots that we have out front, we have other spices growing. Our rosemary, we have fresh rosemary, fresh thyme, a few other ones. I'm not even sure what all we have growing out there. In the garden that is just being planted is a lot of other fresh veggies. So when time comes, we'll be canning and getting some of that put away, put up for the winter. Not that we're going to have a lot. We used to garden a lot more. Well, when I say we, I mean my wife. I'm there for I guess you'd say, the brute force of the thing. I'm the guy that's got to run the tiller through everything and turn the soil and do whatever else has to be done. I just shoveled 3 wagons, carts, 17 cubic foot carts full of dirt to fill the 2 raised beds that we've got. And if all goes well, we may add another 1 or 2 next year. We'll see how this works. We've had a kind of a weird weather pattern this year. So, I guess the moral of your story, this fine story of mine, is I get to rambling too much when I don't have anybody else to help giving me direction. The moral of it is just kind of experiment a little bit. Read a little. There are some spices that are not going to go good with certain foods. Eggs. You don't want to put garlic in your eggs. It's not a flavor that I like at all. I don't use processed garlic a lot. I will chop a clove. We have a garlic press. You take your clove and knock your skin off it, throw it in a press and give it a squeeze, and out comes your crushed garlic. You can buy it already done in jars in the store. I imagine that it has some preservatives in there to give it more shelf life, but it's still better than using the garlic salts and the garlic powders that are highly processed and that kind of thing. A lot of onions, a lot of fresh tomatoes. Tomatoes go good with a lot of different stuff. I don't care for tomatoes with any kind of fish, but I also don't, lemon goes good with fish and seafood, but not with chicken or beef. The acidic nature doesn't work out real well. However, like with pork, using oranges, you can use orange juice to give it some flavor. If you take some of the country style pork ribs, which are fairly good size, and you marinate them in a mixture of a good barbecue sauce, homemade or not, with orange juice. A lot of people use apple juice, but I like the orange juice. The acids in the orange juice kind of break down the pork a little and just make it fall apart in your mouth. It's wonderful. So there's a lot of things like that. You don't have to overcook your food. A lot of people will cook a steak until it's like shoe leather because they don't want any pink in there. That little bit of pink inside isn't going to hurt you. As long as you bring it up to the temperature that it needs to be, a little pink's not going to hurt. It's actually a lot more flavorful with the pink in there, and you don't have to put all kinds of other crap on it. I've had good steaks and just had them on the grill. Throw them on the grill with no seasoning at all, and by gosh, they're pretty good. Take them and a little salt and a little pepper. Pepper is kind of an overrated or underrated spice as well. It is a spice. I like to use a mix of peppercorns, black, green, red, yellow peppercorns, all in mix them up and throw them all in a milling and just grind them out. They're pretty tasty, a little pepper medley. And you can buy it that way in the stores, already mixed for you. So give that a little thought. Try a few new things. Leave some comments and suggestions below. Everybody stay safe, and God bless. Thanks for watching.